From some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm Valeda Fullwood, and yesterday our nation celebrated MLK Day. Tomorrow marks the presidential inauguration. And today I share this excerpt from a sermon, Remaining Awake Through the Great Revolution, delivered in 1968. 53 years later, at this very moment, those same questions remain relevant and resonant. Tonight, we will share why the Charlotte Center believes now is the right time to pursue the questions before us.
Hello, welcome to the Charlotte Center for the Humanities and Civic Imagination, and thank you for being with us tonight. Also, thank you, Valeda, for opening our gathering and bringing us together. I'm Deborah Bosley, former professor of English and founder of the Plain Language Group, and I'm honored to be chair of the board of the Charlotte Center, a new nonprofit in response to the times we live in. Tonight is our inaugural event on the eve of yet another inauguration tomorrow. Inaugurations are about beginnings, about hope, about possibility and new futures. And that's what we are about. We want to envision and challenge and inspire for the common good. We want to share with you who we are, our story, our mission, our programs, and why we believe in this work. You will also hear from our special guest, Richard Blanco, a poet who has his own history with inaugurations, who will talk to us about how to love a country. And finally, we'll end tonight with an invitation for you to join us in this experiment that we are calling the Charlotte Center. Thank you again. Let's get underway. And I'd like to introduce the founder of the Charlotte Center, my friend, Mark Paris.
Thanks, Deborah, and thank you, Valeda. And thank all of you for joining in tonight. I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm thrilled to introduce the Charlotte Center to you. We want to do something special. We want to bring people together in new ways. We want to rebuild trust and value truth grounded in reality. And we want to inspire and equip people to actively engage in community life. In very simple terms, we want to help more people do more good. And we want to meet the moment we are in. The Charlotte Center started with a conversation. What could be next for our city? What could help us become a more resilient and innovative place? And an answer quickly surfaced, an Aspen Institute-like community think tank generating big ideas for the region, a place that would convene doers making the future happen. Now, over the course of a year, with the guidance and contribution of many people, the idea evolved to what we are sharing with you tonight. The Charlotte Center is a community forum and civic action catalyst that invites people into meaningful connection and problem solving. A place named after our city, but one whose work is relevant and urgent everywhere. A place focused on civic bonds and democracy because it is only through shared effort that we can realize our best selves. So what are we going to do? We're going to invite people across the community to share their lived experience. We're going to explore the common good, and we're going to help people turn inspired ideas into action that preserve and defend democracy. At the core of the center is a deep regard for the humanities, those disciplines that explore the human experience. The humanities are universal. Poetry, architecture, philosophy, history, religion, language, and literature ask deep questions about the human condition and what is true, beautiful, and good. The humanities offer a basis for a different kind of conversation, one that seeks to understand who we are and who we can be. My own journey has led me to believe deeply in the power of the humanities and civic life. I am the last of 5 children of parents from Brazil who emigrated to the United States pursuing the American dream. I grew up in many places in different states, cities, and neighborhoods, from California to New York to Florida, moving from one school to another, often in the same year, as my parents took risks and sought opportunity. My father was Jewish, my mother was Catholic, my friends were Black and Puerto Rican, Asian, and Cuban. We believed in better days ahead, and that belief sustained us through very difficult times. Every place I lived shaped a vision of America, multi-ethnic, contentious, spirited. And every place I lived shaped a possibility for America, a place where everyone belongs, everyone matters, and everyone is accountable. American ideals of freedom and justice can be cruel because they are often reserved for a privileged few. Too many people experience the American dream as a broken promise. We know the history of America. Events happening right now remind us again of the truth of what William Faulkner said. The past is never dead, it's not even past. But our American ideals carry us through the darkest moments and give us national purpose. They pick us up bloodied and bruised off the floor. They set our eyes on the prize. And that prize is a more inclusive democracy where everyone can live into their full potential. The education I received infused a love of learning and a love for the personal dignity and freedom. In college, I studied history. From Greece to the modern world, I studied the rise of fascism between the 2 world wars, how quickly we can lose our way, how quickly we can become complicit in hate and destruction. My senior project was on American civil religion, the symbols, rituals, and monuments that provide a sacred text for our national identity. I explored how the stories we tell give us common cause, how the preservation of democracy is only as good as our better angels. We asked big questions. What makes life meaningful? How can I be of use and make a difference? What is good and true? And how do I know? I went to law school and spent a summer in Washington, D.C. More questions. How do we order liberty? How do we create value and share wealth? How do we resolve differences? How do we affect change? Then years in law and business and education. My journey led me to redefine public service as a series of personal creative ventures, from publishing Charlotte Viewpoint, a magazine that explored arts, culture, and civic life, teaching courses at Johnson & Wales University on ethics and leadership, hosting a podcast called On Life and Meaning, where I interviewed creative citizens on what mattered most in their lives, writing columns and essays about a more humane world, and supporting the work of remarkable artists and civic entrepreneurs, of which there are many in Charlotte. And now this center that connects the humanities to our civic imagination. Henry Jenkins, a professor of communication at the forefront of civic imagination work, has written, "The work of freeing the imagination is transformative. It paves the way for meaningful action. It opens a space where those who have not yet committed to a specific agenda can work through options. It allows otherwise opposing groups to find a path forward together." So think of the center as old school and new school. Our hope is to help create better futures, futures in which we can govern ourselves well, futures in which we trust each other, futures in which we live into liberty and justice for all. Now that's a tall order, but that is the American project. That is the Enlightenment project. America is a ridiculously bold venture, one fraught with all sorts of disappointments and failures and shocks. We are imperfect people doing imperfect things, and yet we keep hope alive. We try again, we light the lamp. There is a theory of change that guides me. The more connected and innovative we are, the more we operate in a network of cooperation, the more likely we are to thrive. We know human intelligence comes in many forms across multiple domains. the intelligence of mechanics and athletes and accountants, parents, scholars, cooks, and counselors. The broader and deeper our multiple skills and talents are in community, and the more proximate we are to each other, the greater the capacity for regeneration. But that doesn't ensure a beloved community. We also have to be humble in what we think we know. We have to see ourselves in each other. And the humanities offer a particular lens and catalyst for community evolution. The humanities pose unsettling questions, pass on accumulated wisdom, and challenge our priorities and commitments. Our focus is the humanities, but we won't be limited by that focus. We will be informed by the social sciences, the natural sciences, and professional disciplines. We want to be informed by a diversity of people, culture, and ideas. And we want to take what we learn out into the world as engaged citizens. In designing our programming, we asked, well, what if we could reimagine community engagement? What if we could be informed by community-wide insights, gather with the intent to build authentic relationships, take deep dives into complex and nuanced topics, and activate ground-up ideas? Ideas about what? About the practical concerns of life, whether that's housing or healthcare, public safety or transportation, education or good-paying jobs. It's up to you to decide what you care about, and for us to equip and inspire you as best we can to make it happen. That's our vision. So our programming is designed to do just that. And I'd like to turn next to three remarkable teammates who will share with you how we are going to do it. Our programming moves from data to ideas to action to reflection, taking this integrative approach to serving our mission. You will hear about SenseMaker, the Forum, and our Accelerator series. And then we will introduce our very special guest, Richard Blanco. So we begin with SenseMaker. Kristen?
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm Kristen Eshelman. I lead innovation out of the president's office at Davidson College. And several months ago, I learned about the launch of the center and shared with Mark a unique technology and method we use on campus that brings the lived experience of our students directly into our formal decision-making process. The technology is called SenseMaker. It's a software. It allows us to do storytelling at scale. And the way it works is students can submit their stories and interpret the meaning of their own stories through a series of prompts. The tool will then plot that data onto a dashboard where everyone in the community can see clusters and patterns that reveal what is and isn't working well at Davidson. We then examine those patterns and stories together as a community. SenseMaker helps us make better decisions by balancing both the top-down and the ground-up ideas. And it's that balance that empowers both students and administrators to identify sustainable change. We're doing this at Davidson because we know that the best ideas often come from those closest to the problem. And I proposed to Mark, what if we could bring this method to Charlotte and empower residents in a similar way? And I'm happy to share that the Charlotte Center is going to bring this SenseMaker series to the region. Over the next 2 months, we'll partner with the City of Charlotte's Neighborhood and Community Partnership Division and community leaders to co-design the first SenseMaker series. We plan to collect over 1,000 stories from neighbors across Charlotte. This year, that framework will focus on belonging. We all know we're more likely to be civically engaged when we have a strong sense of belonging, and working with residents, we want to explore the experiences that foster or impede that sense of belonging. And then together, we will identify and design for the sustainable change we want to see. So throughout the year, we will share data and insights from the SenseMaker series with you as part of our forum gatherings. We see great value in closing the gap between what the community knows and what decision makers often think. And at our year-end festival, you'll be invited to engage with the data directly and with communities as we move from insights to action. So this is a pilot year. In the years ahead, we would love to scale this to many more stories across the region. In my experience leading innovation at Davidson, it's really the stories that move the needle. And I personally believe that everyone's voice deserves to have an impact. So getting proximate to our own stories and to each other, as Mark mentioned before, can change the narrative and fuel action. I'm excited about this initiative and invite all of you to get involved as SenseMaker unfolds. I'm also really excited about this team and delighted to introduce Angela, who will say a bit more about the forum.
Thank you, Kristen. And good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Gala. I'm a partner at Rogers & Gala, an event design and management firm. My role in the Charlotte Center is to help produce our events and gatherings. At the core of our programming is a speaker and conversation series we're calling The Forum. The Forum is an event we plan on having every other month, similar to the gathering tonight. At the Forum, we want to connect people from across the community and explore deep questions about the human experience. And we want to inspire people to engage in enlightened civic action. We define enlightened as those ideas informed by the humanities and civic imagination. At many civic engagement events, people listen passively. An expert talks from the stage, there's Q&A at the end, and people go home. Personal connections aren't made, ideas aren't captured or supported. It doesn't seem to lead to new people participating or to meaningful change. We want to do that differently. We want to spend time at the beginning of our events helping people make authentic personal connections, intimate conversations that allow people to reveal themselves to each other, prompted by a question. We'll then ask a national or local speaker to present on the humanities, art, poetry, history, philosophy, literature, and connect their topic to the practical concerns of community life. The presenter ends with a question for us to consider. We then discuss the question. We capture ideas, and as a center, we work to support those ideas. I've always been fascinated by ancient Greece and the society and culture and innovations they were able to bring to life. Their search for goodness, truth, and beauty produced goodness, truth, and beauty. The ancient directive, know thyself, was the basis for their civil discourse within their agora, where civic matters were debated, as if to say, know thyself, and you understand all. The forum is our agora, and I am so excited to see what our search will produce. We plan on hosting the forum in person after work at different venues around town. Until we can gather again in person, we'll start off online as best we can. Our first forum event will be a virtual gathering in March, so be on the lookout for that invitation. We also want to explore a theme this year, How to Love a Country, the title of the most recent collection of poems by our guest tonight, Richard Blanco. Under that broad theme, we imagine conversations around citizenship and national identity, inclusive capitalism, racial reconciliation, and our relationship with our environment, all of which we think are primary concerns of the 21st century in America. In addition to the forum, we're also beginning work on a series we are calling Wisdom Wednesdays. It's a casual, interactive conversation series during the lunch hour. We will have more to announce on that soon. If you're interested in working with me on any of these events, please let me know. I look forward to what we can create together. And now I'm going to hand you back over to Valeda, who will talk to you about our accelerator. Valeda?
Thanks, Angela. Hi again. I'm a Charlotte-based writer, social innovator, and what I like to call an idea whisperer. After years of organizing and participating in a wide range of creative projects and civic initiatives here and afar, I am happy to be involved with the launch of the Charlotte Center and to lead the Accelerator series. You know who else would be happy? My favorite high school teacher who, for 3 solid years, steeped me in the humanities, animating my love of literature, languages, history, philosophy, politics, and constant learning. The Accelerator series is a combination of online and in-person programs to help you turn your inspired ideas into action. Speaking from experience, I know how frustrating it can be to sense or even know there's a better way. You have ideas and a desire to make the world a better place, yet you may not be sure what step to take next. That's where the Accelerator series comes in. We want to help you bring your civic imagination to life. We envision resources such as a virtual 1-hour consultancy that surrounds you with a diverse community of advisors and coaches, and perhaps a digital resource hub with downloadable how-to guides, templates, worksheets, maybe online courses to build capacities. We also want to connect you to existing organizations doing the work you're interested in. You see, the Accelerator series is ultimately to be shaped by you and will evolve with input from you and the center's community of civic innovators and supporters. We're going to invite you to provide input on what we'll offer. We're truly interested in what you have to say and how we can be responsive and supportive. The festival is another facet of the center. A year from now, we plan on having a one-day symposium with featured speakers, panel discussions, presentations, workshops, and conversations based on insights gained over the year. At the festival, we will report out from SenseMaker and invite the community to interpret the patterns that emerge from the stories that we're collecting from across the region. It's about activation, impact, reflection, and new visions. Again, collaboration with other organizations and the community we're building will be crucial. From SenseMaker to the forum, to the accelerator, to the festival, the Charlotte Center seeks to cultivate and elevate ideas from the ground up to promote greater civic agency. If you want to know how to help me help people turn their ideas into action, let me know in the survey that we'll be sharing later on. Mark, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Valeda. And now, Richard Blanco. I'm so pleased to introduce him. I heard him on the radio and felt an immediate connection to him, and I think you will too. Richard Blanco is the 5th presidential inaugural poet, having recited his poem One Today at the 2nd inauguration of President Barack Obama. He is a civil engineer who blends his thinking about structure and design with the sentiments of his life experience. Born in Madrid to Cuban exile parents and raised in Florida, his work focuses on cultural identity and universal themes of place and belonging. Richard is an award-winning author of 2 memoirs and 4 poetry collections. He is the first ever education ambassador for the Academy of American Poets and is a member of the Obama Foundation's Advisory Council. His most recent collection of poems is entitled How to Love a Country. So welcome, Richard.
Great to be with all of you. It's, gosh, I'm so moved already for all these speeches. I'm like, sign me up.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, especially on this day, the night before the inauguration. And tomorrow is a big day. Not too long ago in 2013, you stood on the inaugural stage. Over 1 million people were gathered on the Washington Mall. You read your poem, One Today. However, tonight, the Capitol is a very, very different place. It's an armed camp. The pandemic is raging. The Washington Mall is closed. What are your thoughts on the eve of the new inauguration tomorrow?
Well, Mark, it's, in many ways, bittersweet feelings all across the board, so to speak. I'm thinking about that beautiful moment of speaking and waiting to be 1 million people in front of the mall compared to the images that you're talking about. The moment I turned to my mother as I was waiting to be called up to the podium, and I turned to her and said, well, Mama, I think we're finally Americanos. We're finally Americans. That sense of feeling embraced, feeling loved by America, not just for myself, but so many people that probably felt left out of the American narrative for so many years. So it's really interesting to think about that contrast. I'm excited by the presidency and what's ahead, but I'm also keenly aware that there's a lot of work ahead of us, right? That it's not as easy as just electing a new president. And I'm also sort of scared that we'll be, lulled into a false sense of security that just because our side, won, that there's no work to do. There's a lot of work to do, which is what part of what the Charlotte Center is doing, right? Um, and just thinking about we can toss a lot of words around like healing or unity or whatnot, but I think what we really need to do now, and I think what the center is trying to do, is to really examine that closely, examine ourselves, and think about what those words really mean, and think about creating another kind of dialogue and really understanding what we're trying to achieve, right? What this country really needs right now. We want to say heal, but what's the diagnosis exactly, right? What do we need to heal? And on another level, I'm kind of shocked, of course, with all the events of the past 4 years and whatnot. And who wouldn't be, right? But also, again, in that theme of the bittersweet, this is a reckoning that has to happen, right? Like, granted, it could have happened in a less violent and a less hateful way, but it's certainly a reckoning. And so on the other side, I'm happy in the sense that maybe we will finally start having these conversations as a nation that have been swept under the rug, ignored, postponed, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a bunch of mixed feelings. I you know but I think in the end, just something positive. I think we're at a turning point.
Yeah, I think, Richard, we're all feeling those mixed emotions, and we're hoping that a better day is ahead of us. You've filled such an interesting role as an inaugural poet. There's only been 5 of them in American history. And I'm wondering, what is the role of the inaugural poet?
Well, like my partner Mark likes to say, there's more people have gone to the moon than have been inaugural poets. Don't get me wrong, I still want to go to the moon, but of course I've had to research that when I got the assignment, right? What is an inaugural poet? And what I learned historically is that it's really, the poet is supposed to provide a vision. It's not a coincidence that the poem is read towards the end of the ceremony. And it's not supposed to be a political speech, something I struggled with because I thought, do I have to be political? Like, am I supposed to like praise Obama? Like what's that all about? But it's really providing a vision for a country. Well, more than a vision, it's sort of to look at our past, our present, and our future. And really in non-political terms, really in the most beautiful poetic terms, right? And I also, thinking about what the inaugural poet means, is also, I just love that it, like, each one sort of provides a kind of a snapshot of who we are thinking we are as a country at each one. So if you really think about it, from 1968, Robert Frost, reads his poem, to Richard Blanco, 2013, a gay Cuban immigrant, working class, at the time, the youngest inaugural poet. Um, and to think, just sort of sets a tone about, or a mirror, you could say. It's a mirror back to the country to say, this is who we've been, who we are, what we're understanding about ourselves, and here's where we could go. And it's really just such a beautiful tradition in that sense. And it is, in some ways, although that's such a political moment, in some ways, the inaugural poet's role is, in some ways, apolitical, oddly enough.
Richard, for those people who are unfamiliar with the poem that you read, One Today, could you briefly share with us what the vision that you shared in your poem?
Well, at the time, things felt good. We had elected an African American president. We thought we had turned a corner. I don't think we thought we did turn a corner. But there's, of course, like I said, a lot of unanswered questions, things we hadn't really addressed, a reckoning we really hadn't come to. And so the poem was inspired by 2 things. One is my roots, much like you, Mark, growing up in Miami and in a cultural and ethnic community, and realizing that as exiles, as immigrants, we had to depend on each other for survival, for prosperity, just emotionally, we had to depend on each other. And combining that idea with the Buddhist philosophy, or rather the Buddhist thinking of interdependence, right? That we're all connected in ways that we're not always aware of, right? But that my quality of life depends on everybody else's quality of life, and vice versa. So those 2 things went into the poem. And what I tried to do was create this landscape, kind of a Whitman-esque landscape, but brought up to date. Thinking about how we're moving through our whole day. And the poem that's why it's called One Today, as we move through our day, how we're each doing our thing, but we're actually doing our thing together. And that was part of what the message I wanted to, or rather the mirror, as I said, that I wanted to hold up to America. You may not realize this, but here we are all together, you know, and a plea to continue that that charge of our motto, out of the many one, e pluribus unum, right? And to think about how we're not one yet, because there still was that tension in the poem, right? It wasn't like, like Obama got elected president and we're all one people and everything's fine. Still a lot of work to do. And obviously we're seeing that now, that there's still a lot of work to do. But there's that tension also built into the poem of thinking of like, here's your charge to continue this journey, to continue this idea of creating a more perfect union.
Richard, the title of your most recent collection of poems is How to Love a Country, which is going to be our theme for this year. Why that title?
Well, it comes from a couple things. The White House actually asked me to write 3 poems. I'm not sure why. I'm the only one that they asked to write 3 poems. But, and so obviously the second poem was the one I read. The first poem is a whole other poem, but the third poem is called Mother Country, or Madre Patria. And for that, I sought inspiration in my mother's journey as an exile, as a Cuban exile and immigrant, and thinking about how she is more of an American than I could ever be for that leap of faith. She left her entire family behind in Cuba. She left everything she knew for the sake of that, following that quintessential American dream. And so I started thinking about that in the poem itself. Uh, there's a line in the refrain in the poem is to love a country as if you've lost one. And I started thinking back how she's more of an American than I could ever be for that act of faith, and thinking about what that means and how do you see a country through an immigrant's eyes. And so the title comes from there, How to Love a Country, sort of a take on that. And again, it kind of is that, but it's also, the title, if you really think about it, it's kind of a directive, how to love a country, like a statement. It's also a question, how to love a country. How do you love a country? What is a country? What is our relationship to a country? And recently it's become more of a self-help book, like how to love a country. Right? But the idea being it's an exploration of all these ideas of country, not in these antiquated senses of, I mean, certainly looks at history, but also not in those antiquated idea of that a country is this neat thing with borders and that, but rather, really, if you think about it, what is a country today? So part of the book is questioning the idea of national boundaries to begin with. So all that went into the book, but it also came out of the inauguration, right? I was forced to think about the idea of country in ways that I had never thought before. Yeah, okay, I'm an American now, felt American for the 100% for the first time. But what does that mean, right? Do I have to give up other things? All those things went into that book.
Yeah, Richard, I think we're all going through a self-help moment right now. Um, well, one of your poems in this collection is entitled America the Beautiful Again. And I was wondering if you might introduce it and read it to us.
Sure. This is just kind of a throwback to not a throwback, but a flashback. In the midst of all this political turmoil and all these years of like division and polarization and whatnot, I just started trying to get in touch with what is the real essence of my sense of country, especially in America, because as an immigrant or a child of immigrants, I really have a kind of a great reverence for the ideals of this country, that the ideals that this country promised the world. And so that's embedded for me in the song America the Beautiful, and thinking about patriotism in not the ugly way, but in the real innocent way, like when we're in grade school and we're singing America the Beautiful, and the fine line between those two things. So here it is, America the Beautiful again. How I've sang, oh, beautiful, like a psalm at church with my mother, her Cuban accent scaling up every vowel. Oh, beautiful, yet in perfect pitch, delicate and tuned to the radiant beams of stained glass light. How she taught me to fix my eyes on the crucifix as we sang our thanks to our Savior for this country that saved us. Our voices, hymns, as passionate as the organ piping up to the very heavens. How I sang for spacious skies, closer to those skies, while perched on my father's sunbeat shoulders, towering above our first 4th of July parade. How the timber through our bodies mingled, breathing, singing as one. Sorry, I had a glitch on my computer right now. We're all good? Okay, that was not me. That was a Zoom glitch. All right, here we go. Uh, how the timber through our bodies mingled, breathing, singing as one with the brass notes of the marching band, playing the only song he ever learned in English. I dared to sing it at assembly with my teenage voice cracking for amber waves of grain that I'd never seen, nor the purple mountains' majesties, but could imagine them in each verse rising from my gut. Each exclamation of praise I belted out until my throat hurt. America. And again, America. How I began to read Nietzsche and doubt God, but still wished for God to shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. But I still want to sing, despite all the truth of our wars and our gunshots ringing louder than our school bells, our politicians smiling lies at the mic, the deadlock of our divided voices shouting over each other instead of singing together. Oh, I want to sing again, beautiful or not, just to be in harmony from sea to shining sea with the only country I know enough and love enough to sing for.
Thank you for that, Richard. That's just beautiful. You are a civil engineer. How does that discipline inform the work that you do?
Well, it's interesting. You know, again, speaking about the humanities and how they cross so many boundaries, I always say engineering paved the road to poetry because I was always a creative person and whatnot. But of course, as a working class kid immigrant, I had very little access to the arts, and that wasn't even a possibility as a career. And it wasn't until I got into my engineering that I understood the power of language. Oddly enough, I had to write reports, studies, letters, proposals to get $100 million jobs into the firm, and realize that writing, talk about creative writing, write a proposal, right? Like, and realizing that language is power. Language was something that every human endeavor in the end has to depend on language in some way. And so I started sort of really geeking out on language, as I like to say, and exploring it on another level as poetry, and started writing really bad poems and whatnot. And eventually got better and blah, blah, blah. That's another history. But the idea was that actually language was a bridge between these two worlds. Because at the end of the day, I was also a civil engineer, and that meant I was a municipal engineer, city planner, town town consultant. I would recreate space and places, and my poetry is all about place, belonging. So I I got to sit with communities for you know, 2 or 3 years discussing how are we going to revamp this town, because what do we keep, what do we not take? And these are the same questions that were in my mind as a poem, as a poet. What, you know, what is place, what is belonging? So all those things kind of came together in a really fascinating way.
Yeah, what strikes me when I look at your poetry also is visually how it's constructed, and that each one of your poems looks like a bridge, a building, a civic space, and the attention that you give to its form is as important as to what you say.
Yeah, their poems are built, and
Yeah.
that's another thing that I think a misnomer of how we understand careers and you know, choices. But even I see my students struggle with. Do you know how much like
Okay. Richard, I do have a question. You know, we open up the New Yorker, we open up the Atlantic, we see poetry. Sometimes it's hard to access, and we wonder how relevant poems are in our lives, especially modern poetry that often can be very difficult to unwind. And I'm wondering, why should we care about poetry? What difference does it make in our lives? It's something on my mind, especially as we launch the Center for the Humanities. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a bit about why poetry matters.
Sure. Well, I think we've all seen in the last few years that words matter, that language matters. In fact, if you really think about it, the whole idea of civilization rests on language, right? We the people, in order to form a more perfect union. I mean, everything comes down to language. And of course, what do poets do but pay attention to language in really microscopic, important ways? And so you look to poetry for many things, to to get away from the common rhetoric from the news or from like even newspapers. I mean, to just really learn something new and different. Honestly, like poetry offers us a different mindset. It offers us a way to think about things, feel things in a different way. I would say I would expand that to all humanities, right? And it's not just poetry, but poetry in particular, in terms of language, we can understand how important that is. And so, I I I think poetry has been relevant, will always be relevant. It is the foundation of, I mean, it's communal, it's song, it's oral tradition, it's community building. It is a song. It's the way that we can gather around and think about a feeling and not just an idea. It is so many things to the world. Um, and don't get me wrong, I have my own struggles with it too, but I mean, poetry just offers, in a way, another language to our language. And we are so polluted. I mean, we are terribly polluted by horrible, terrible language every day: academic language, political language, news language. And the poet erases all that and says, what is the new language? What is the thing? What are the things that how is language leading us to a new kind of dialogue, a new kind of discourse, a new kind of conversation? I love the idea that was presented as um, uh, idea of the idea of a whisperer of ideas. Poets are whisperers of ideas through language, and the arts, the visual artists do it in their own way. The musicians do it in their own way. But the reality is that the humanities as a whole give us not just a way to think, but a way to feel, and that's really important.
Yeah, I love that, Richard. I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, we are more than material beings, right? I mean, we have a set of needs from the physiological to the spiritual, and poetry, like all the arts, speak to the fullness of our humanity. And I also love this notion of how, you know, everything begins with language, right? Language gives birth to civilization. We speak things into existence. In the beginning was the word, right? And you think about Western civilization, Eastern civilization, and all begins with epic poetry, the Iliad, the Upanishads, Genesis. And I also think every conversation gives birth to an idea. So language is really where it all begins. And the other thing that's been on my mind is I think our deepest wisdom is poetic. There's a moral authority to poetry, reminding us who we are and what we must do. And so I think that's really, how it resonates with me. Is there a poem or poet that you find yourself turning to often in your life?
Um, there are, of course, my favorites, or the people, the masters that keep on teaching me, but I don't also cling to any one particular poet because I cling to masterpieces, right? I don't need necessarily an aficionado of any one particular poet per se. But the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock keeps, I still read it every month out loud in my room and dance around. Um, and so many masterpieces like that, they keep on teaching me.
Yeah.
There's one poet in particular, Elizabeth Bishop, that has stayed with me for a while for reasons that are not immediately, you think, what does a Cuban immigrant working class kid have to do with Elizabeth Bishop, right? Like, but she was psychologically in exile all her life. And that idea that a poem holds a mirror to you and you hold the mirror to the reader is really, really beautiful. And I see that in her. But lately I've been thinking, and my favorite poets lately are really the poets that come from the spoken word tradition that carry that idea of the poet as a village voice, the poet as the community builder, the poet as the one that can speak to the king and the pauper, so to speak. You know, the poet that sort of like song that can galvanize us and really be as one, right? So poets like Patricia Smith and like Rachel McKibbins and Danette Smith and yeah, and it's actually they actually tend to be on the younger side of the spectrum, which is really beautiful and wonderful because they are there and present and they've carried that tradition. And so a lot of our objection to poetry, this is going to be the Professor Blanco now, but has to do when poetry became very academic and languagey. And that was not the modernists, actually. that was it was actually people whose names I will not name, but like it was kind of in the 70s where there was this idea that we have to take back language, and it's like really language is not yours to take or give. It is language. It is something that is organic and comes out of it organically develops out of a society, and so that's why I love these kinds of poets who are also incredibly accomplished on the page as well as the stage but can deliver that poem. Even our current, our soon to be inaugural poet, Amanda Gordon, who can like, has that spirit in her, you know, has that spirit of like, it's more than just about me, it's about us.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear her tomorrow. And I know everyone in our audience will be introduced to a dynamic poet tomorrow. Richard, I'm mindful of the time, and I'm wondering if there's a second poem that you'd read called Declaration of Interdependence.
Sure. And this poem, I guess this is a good point for us to start the sort of the thinking and the Q&A. But two things about this poem. I was thinking again, I don't know how Buddhist and Cuban really connect exactly, but I was also thinking about this Buddhist idea of interdependence that I feel in my own Cuban community, and then which is kind of like there's dependence, independence, which is the Declaration of Independence, and then there's interdependence, which is the higher form of thinking. And I think America is stuck on independence. We're stuck on this idea that every man for himself, best man wins. You know, I got mine, you get yours. The idea of competition, and like we need to move to another phase of realizing, which is again what I tried to express a little in the inaugural poem. And so this poem is playing with that and also using excerpts from the Declaration of Interdependence to try to advance that, not subvert it or deny it, but to advance that and see how it applies today. And it's also inspired by another thing, which is the Zulu people's greeting. Um, They don't say like good morning like we do in the elevator, like good morning. Right? They look you to look the other person in the eyes and say, I see you. And the person responds to saying, I see you. So that's part of this and how we need to get back to seeing each other. And I think the humanities poetry is a way to truly, truly see each other.
So Richard, we have 3 minutes, and I think your poem comes in just in that time.
Yeah, hopefully. Declaration of Interdependence. Such has been the patient sufferance, where mothered bread, instant potatoes, milk at a checkout line, where her three children pleading for bubble gum and their father, where the 3 minutes she steals to page through a tabloid, needing to believe even stars' lives are as joyful, just as bruised. Her repeated petitions have been entered only by repeated injury. Where her second job is serving an executive absorbed in his Wall Street Journal at a sidewalk cafe, shadowed by skyscrapers, were the shadows of the fortune he won and the family he lost, where his loss and the loss were a father in a coal town who can't mine a life anymore because too much and too little has happened for too long. A history of repeated injuries and usurpations. We're the grit of his Main Street's blackout windows and graffitied truths. We're street in another town lined with palms at a home with Peace Corps couples who collect African art. Where their dinner party talk of wines, will they picket signs and burn draft cards? Where what they know, it's time to do more than read the New York Times, buy fair trade coffee and organic corn. In every stage of oppressions, we have petitioned for redress. We are the farmer who grew that organic corn, who plows into his couch as one at his back by the end of the day, where his TV set blaring news, having everything, nothing to do with the field dust in his eyes, or his son nested in the ache of his arms. We are his son. We're a black teenager who drove too fast or too slow, talked too much or too little, moved too quickly, but not quick enough. We're the blast of the bullet leaving the gun. We are the guilt and the grief of the cop who wished he hadn't shot. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We're the dead, we're the living, amid the flicker of vigil candlelight. We're in a dim cell with an inmate reading Dostoevsky, where his crime, his sentence is amends, we're the mending of ourselves and others. We're a Buddhist serving soup at a shelter alongside a stockbroker. We're each other's shelter and hope. A widow's 50 cents in a collection plate and a golfer's $10,000 pledge for the cure. We hold these truths to be self evident. We hold these truths to be self evident. We are the cure for the hatred caused by our despair. With a good morning of a bus driver who remembers our name, the tattooed man who gives us his seat on the subway, where every door held open with a smile when we look into each other's eyes. The way we behold the moon, we are the moon. We are the promise of one people, one breath, declaring to one another, I see you, I need you.
Thank you, Richard. Would you stay with us at the top of the hour for questions?
Sure.
All right. Thank you so, so much. Well, we're going to bring this to a close. There's a few things we want to share with you before we end tonight's program. We're at the part of the program where we ask you to get involved. We want your help, and we need your help to make this work. So what can you do? Well, first, you can give us a call. Let's talk. Think about what we could do together. Everything begins with a conversation. Let's have that conversation. My phone number is on the screen. Donate, sponsor our work. There are opportunities with each of our programs. Funding will make all the difference in what we can do. Connect us to speakers. Who do you know who might be a great presenter? Maybe we can partner on bringing them to town. And work with our team and tell other people about us, help us build community. We will be sending an email out tonight with a survey asking for your thoughts and ways you might help. Please take the time to complete it. There are a few people I'd like to thank who helped us get us to this point. People who made financial contributions, who believed in us, who gave us ideas, encouragement and guidance. They know who they are. I'm grateful for every interaction and vote of confidence along the way. And thank you also to our sponsors and partners. Their willingness to support organizations like ours and their generosity make all the difference in the health and vitality of our community. So please support them in turn. And finally, to my board of directors, Deborah and Cherie and Jonathan and Jessica and Tomas and Christy, thank you for saying yes. Thank you for your personal support. Thank you for your faith in the mission and in the team. And so we're going to end by, I'm going to ask Angela to just say a few words and we will bring our evening to a close.
Thank you, Mark. We'll wrap this evening the same way we began. We'll end tonight with a poem from the poet I cling to, Rainer Maria Rilke. I choose to begin. I love all beginnings, despite their anxiousness and their uncertainty, which belong to every commencement. If I have earned a pleasure or a reward, or if I wish that something had not happened, if I doubt the worth of an experience and remain in my past, then I choose to begin at this very second. Begin what? I begin. I have already thus begun 1,000 lives. This concludes our program for this evening. If you would like to stay with us, we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A with Richard and some time afterward for you to ask questions of the team. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And now I will turn it over to Kristen, who will give you some instructions on the Q&A. Kristen?
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around for some Q&A. Thank you, Richard, for staying another 15 minutes. We have two ways to take questions. You can raise your hand using the reactions link at the bottom on your Zoom screen, and we will bring you on stage so that you can ask that question verbally. Or you can put a question in the chat and we will take questions there. So we will open it up. I'm going to start because I know I have someone already in the queue who has a question with Valeda Fullwood. So Valeda, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Kristen. So yes, Richard, as a child of the 70s and a geek when it comes to TV sitcoms, I wanted to ask a question about the presence of Marsha Brady in your work.
Sure. It's kind of it's kind of like negotiating this line between this. Again, growing up in Miami, I kind of luckily, I wasn't a minority in the sense that I was part of the fabric of society, a very tight-knit Cuban community. But also what happened to that, I just idealized this America. I thought that Marsha Brady and the Brady Bunch was everything else in America. So it's like this kind of always this play back and forth. And I thought that was only my issue, but I realized everybody in America was not the Brady Bunch, and they always had issues with trying to be the Brady Bunch. So I love pushing back against all those because, in a sense, as a young country, what is our mythology? What is our folklore? Right? We don't have, we're not Greece. Okay, let's face it. We may be informed by Greece, but let's get a grip on that. We're not really Greece, right? So the only thing that really has collectively, well, not the only thing, but one of the major things that informed us collectively as a nation that came to power really during after World War II and the birth of television and so this lives in our mythology and I'm always reacting against it, with it, against it, and it represents this American dream and something I don't want to toss out, something that never existed really, but neither did the Greek gods, really. Like, right, like, but it's something we always push against, want to believe in, and are trying to substitute. I think in these days with something else, right? Like that idea of like the perfect white little family, and like, and I thought again, I thought it was only my thing. I realized even like white family, like we don't live like that. Like we wanted to be Martian ready. So I just love. There's a poem in the new book. It's called "Let's Remake America Great," which is a play on that whole 1950s, 60s sort of television world. And a play also on obviously Let's Make America Great Again. America was never that great, let's face it. And this is the rhetoric in terms of also how language matters that that Trump used to realize this mythology that never really existed, right? It was this myth. Like the 50s were not great, right? They certainly weren't great for gay people. They certainly weren't great for people of color. They certainly weren't great for immigrants. It was great for a thin sliver of really white people, and that was all that was about. And yet we're supposed to live up to that ideal. And so again, but it's our mythology. We have to we have to respond to that and act with it and against it. The idea that we should all be prosperous and live the American dream is valid. But beyond that, what does that mean today? It's an outdated model. And that's where I think also the conversation of the arts can take us to a different place. Let's not keep on rehashing the American. I'm so tired of saying American dream myself. I'm just tired of it. There is no American dream, people. Like, let's just face that already. Like, that's a concept created by bankers in to make people buy homes, and we ingest it left and right as this idea of something that never really existed. So anyway, sorry, but I hear you, whisperer.
So I'm going to jump over to the chat and then I'll jump back to Tomas. Michael Marsicano has a question, a fun one. So our inaugural poet for tomorrow declared on PBS last night that she intends to run for president. Richard, do you have similar plans?
Unfortunately, I can't because although I was named after Richard Nixon, um, not because of political terms. I was born in Spain. My mother left 7 months pregnant from Cuba. I was born in Spain, and they had no idea of any politics in America. But uh, uh, Richard Nixon had just been elected president, so they named me after Richard Nixon. Ricardo, not Richard, but Ricardo. So I missed being president by 45 days. I arrived in this country at 45 days of age. My green card photo is actually my baby photo, my first newborn photo. And it kind of set the stage about thinking about what was Richard going to grow up and write about: place, belonging, identity, country, right? And God, I was so sad when I learned that in this third or fourth grade. I was like, what do you mean I can't be president? Like 45 days. So, like, I could be vice president. I don't know if there's a rule for that.
Well, rules are made to be
Could be the
changed.
first Latino vice president, maybe.
Seems like a good one to change in the first 100 days. Tama, welcome to the stage. Oh, I think you're muted. Oh no, we're having some technical difficulty. Do you want to type it in the chat and I'll pick it up? Okay, in the meantime, Richard, we have another one in the chat uh, from Rachel. It's such a challenge to nurture one's art while working in an unrelated field, but you have accomplished so much. Any advice?
In an unrelated field, I actually found that as a blessing because on both sides of the fence, so to speak, when I was having a bad engineering day, I would just write poetry all day at work. When I was having a bad poetry day, I would just do engineering all day at work. And I actually think that there's a nice balance to that. We can get very entrenched in anything, right? We can get very myopic in anything, even in the arts, even in the poetry. We forget to see, we lose perspective sometimes. So I feel blessed for that. And I just think finding a balance between that is actually a good thing and not necessarily always, I got to say, the last 8 years, I, for the first time, earned my living as a poet. Like it's the dream come true, right? Like, not even as a professor or a teacher of poetry. I'm literally earned my living as a poet. And I got to say, there's this beautiful plus side to it and a minus side, like everything in life. So it's always about trying to find the balance in what's working for you. And sometimes you need that distance to be able to, like, the urgency of, like, yeah, I couldn't write 8 hours a day. Who would want to write eight poetry 8 hours a day? I didn't do engineering out 8 hours a day either. Like, half of it was like gossiping around the water cooler. Let's face it. So the idea is just to find that fine balance, but also realize, what is the horse that leads? What do you really want? We have many career choices and career paths. I set up my life so that I realized, at someday the poetry is the one that weighs in more. So by the time I got enough credit and cred, as we like to say, I just struck a deal with my boss. I said, I want to work 30 hours a week. I don't want to be senior partner. I don't want to manage anybody. I want to sit here and design bridges and roads and cities and make you a lot of money, but don't bug me. And so I knew kind of what was the lead horse. And I think that's kind of one of the things we need to decide. Because it's so easy if you're a creative person, the world doesn't support creativity for the most part. Again, getting back to the idea that that doesn't matter. It's not relevant. It doesn't have any value. Like, so always maintaining that vision, that to prop your life up always to support what it is that you feel is your true, or possibly the thing you're really going to leave behind. And for some, it's engineering. I mean, I can't build the Golden Gate Bridge. That's also a legacy. I don't want us to think that engineers don't have legacies. I mean, we build beautiful things. We live legacies too. It's just you got to decide personally, what is your lead horse, and then the other horses will follow.
Yeah,
Put the other horses in service of that lead horse.
oh, that's great. Tomas did and Angie did put their question in the chat, so I'll read that now. Richard, I had the pleasure of hearing you speak in 2014 at Davidson College. Actually, I was there too. That was great. About looking for the Gulf Motel. You described as the place you don't want messed with is how to love your country, a reaction to something that was messed with. Thank you so much. I love your work, Angie.
Oh, that's right. I know when you mentioned Davidson, I was like, yeah, remember that. And I have a connection to Davidson from a former student of mine too. And I remember that. It was just a special reading. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. So that wasn't a question though, right?
Well, the question was really, is how to love your country a reaction to something that you think was messed with in the same sense?
Well, this idea of how to love a country stems from the same question that I've been writing about the Gulf Motel. What is a country? What is place? What is belonging? I've just expanded the question to think about, well, what is country? It's not just about me being, Cuban or American, or like Cuban American, or like my own, but what does this country mean to us? I mean, after the presidential inaugural experience, you realize this is a question on everybody's mind. And so it was a natural growth out of that. And so I'm asking these questions in just different ways. As I like to say, I'm asking the same question or playing the same song, but with a different instrument. I'm trying to write poems that are more that speak about racism, speak about gender equality, that speak about that. But ultimately, we're asking the universal question, the Homeric question, right? What is home? How do we get there? It's the proverbial existential question of humanity since the dawn of civilization, right? How do we get back home? What is home? Why did we leave? Like what is paradise? It's something, and it's constantly changing and evolving and shifting. And that's why it's the subject of art, because it's ultimately unanswerable. One of my professors, might have been me, I don't remember. I'm too old to realize what I said or what someone else told me. But it was like, good art answers questions. Great art keeps on asking questions. And I live my life and my art and everything else in my life by that motto. What am I not asking?
That's wonderful. Thank you. Rick Thurman had an interesting question for you. If you had to revise the Declaration of Independence today, what would you add, or would you take out anything?
I'm not a Declaration of Independence scholar, although I did study it pretty closely on here. And I got to say, one of the conclusions I came to, and I didn't mention that in the reading, is that we could literally send that Declaration of Independence to Congress today and demand the same things of our people. And this gets into a larger conversation, but this is thinking outside the box. This is what the Humanities Center is about, right? Like, it's an amazing document. I mean, I think the founding fathers slash mothers were aliens. We really think. I mean, we can talk about all. Yes, there's a lot of garbage and a lot of luggage in there, right? Thomas Jefferson. We can think about all that. But those words, I mean, I read them and I still cry. I'm like, and something Mark and I talked about, not on screen, but what, like, even a great document, right? It's poetry. The thing is poetry. And it's still what holds this country together are those words. Like it's just like, so I would say I don't know that I would rewrite anything except something that is obviously of the time. So we got to be cognizant of presentism, right? We can't always judge people 300 years ago, and would we have done any different? Yeah, and like there's word language in there, so I would write something like language about gender and these kinds of things. But the idea that document represents, again, it's still so relevant, and we could send it to Congress and say, yeah, we have not been regressed. We have, you have not done your job. We have you all get your shit together. Like, sorry, I had to break it. I had to do a cuss word,
Obligate.
to break it up a little bit. But literally, I read that document, I'm like, oh my God, these words are still relevant today in a different context, obviously, but they're still relevant.
Thank you. Richard, do you have time for one more question?
Oh, sure, sure.
Great. This is a really good one. This is coming from April. Can you help us understand how to change the negative language of social media?
The negative language of social media in respect to like those kind of like, I don't know. I'm not sure I understand the question. Like,
Yeah, April, do you want to come on stage and clarify?
you mean like the subgroups, or like the idea of hate,
Just
or
hi, Richard. It's April. Just in general, it's so hard on social media because everyone listens to their own echo chamber and is looking for validation of their points. But in trying to figure out how we make connection points, how do we change language to let people see that maybe there's more that we have in common than we really think we do?
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, and that's like, okay. So the poem that I just read was trying to do that, right? And so that idea of like, we can't objectify each other. We can't just speak to our own, we got to check in our own assumptions, our own biases, our own, what we think. It, so I have so much to say about it. That's why I'm pausing. Like, I mean, what I'm really feeling about that is that we don't realize that social media is a capitalist fucking tool. Oh my God, I did the F word. And so like, this is okay. Like, I mean, I'm done with Mark Zuckerberg. I'm done with all the, really now you choose to take him off Twitter now? And they don't realize that you are not immune to social responsibility. It's like a doctor would say, well, I don't know, like that's what the medicine book call for, but I'm not responsible for killing the patient. I'm like, so there's so much to be had about that because technology assumes no social responsibility. Even it's called social media, they assume no social responsibility. It's like it matters. Words matter. What you present is matter. And this is, I'm going to go off. This gets back to First Amendment rights, which people don't really understand what First Amendment. We mouth that off like it's like, oh, I get the right to say whatever you do. Yeah, you get the right to say whatever you do. The First Amendment right only says that the government will not create any law but private companies can tell you what to say or not do. If you show up at your company and you start yelling the N word or whatever, you're fired. There's no First Amendment rights about that. The only thing that the government, the Constitution guaranteed is that the government would not create a law, a federal law that would say that you can't say, but private companies, and that's problematic. And it's also interesting because Facebook can do whatever they want. And the choices that they don't make is really interesting. In the name, I'm going to go off in the name of making money because left and right media are doing the same thing. And so it's like kind of like this idea that, oh, we're gonna like connect everybody and yada yada yada. Yeah, you're taking no responsibility for the power that you have. You have more money than most countries in the world. You can shift a thinking and you need to accept responsibility for that. So it's a big. That's why he had to present in Congress, right? Like, and the idea of echo chamber, I just can't stand it anymore. I can't stand it amongst poets sometimes. To be honest with you, like it's like, why am I preaching to a choir? What this is why I love the project of the Charlotte Center. It's like, let's have a real discussion about this stuff, not like let's just sit in our own, listen to our own stuff, over and over and over again, and realize that that's not going to move the world. It doesn't matter. It's just like everybody else on the other corner listening to their stuff and stuff. And at the end of the day, let's face it, it all comes down to money and power. Let's have that conversation, left and right, right? Like CNN makes money by being the political liberal front, and so does Fox. I'm not equating them, but come on, let's be real about that. Where's the real conversation between these two extremes? And social media does the same thing. Like who I don't know. I can't even begin like to tell you. I've gotten banned from Facebook. I have gotten banned from Facebook before Trump.
Richard, we are at the end of
Not
the.
banned. Please,
I'm not
because of
censoring you, I
political
promise.
content. Like I'm like, oh, like okay, well that's fine, but like, what are your protocols for this? And are you going to accept social responsibility for that or not? And so like, obviously that was a great last question to go on for 30 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Good challenge for us to not, remain in our filter bubbles, even within the center. Richard, thank you again for coming. For those of you who are staying on, we are going to continue for another 15 minutes. If you have any questions about the center, we're here to answer those.
That's it.
No questions. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What next? What is the immediate next thing?
Mark, would you like to take that?
Sure. So we have two things underway. If you think about our programming cycle, we have SenseMaker underway, which is work that Kristen is doing with the city of Charlotte to begin this year-long work of gathering stories across our community. And then we have 2 events that fall under our forum format. So we're going to begin working on and announcing what we hope will be the first Wisdom Wednesday next month in February. And so we have to secure the date, and we're doing that work now and working with our sponsor, Ortho Carolina, to do that work. And then in March, we will have our first forum event, which will be similar tonight, but different. We're going to format it differently in terms of having the first part be this kind of relationship building, authenticity development that we want to do with the folks that come online. So we'll spend time on the front end allowing people to connect and build connection. And then we'll have a presenter who presents an idea for discussion, and we will follow that up with a facilitated discussion. So we're going to be doing these forums every other month, and that first forum will be in March. So that's how we're going to begin. We also have some operational work to do with to make sure that we are secured in order to move forward. So that's our immediate next steps, and we'd love to have you involved and participate going forward.
Yeah, good point, Deborah. We have to begin where we are. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for that point about SenseMaker. Paul made a comment that it's apparently limited to the city of Charlotte residents' stories, but longer term would be important to see stories throughout the county and the metro area. Very true. Thank you for that. Bruce has a question. Mark, do you want to address this one? If you, I can.
And the question is?
He'd like to hear more about the impact the center hopes to make, say, in the next 3 years. Also, how important will it be for participation to come from those who are not normally involved in community, and what can we do? What can each of us do about this?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for that, Bruce. So the next 3 years, right? So we have a lot of programming that we need to do to build up an organization that is sustainable and viable. But if you ask me, where would I like to be one day? I want us to be among the leading arts and cultural institutions here in this region, whether that's a physical space, whether that's dynamic programming, whether that's partnering with other leading institutions, whether that's making use of wonderful space at the new library or the Carolina Theater or all around town. I think there's lots of possibilities that are going to unfold, and we're going to be open to them. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, even though our name is the Charlotte Center, we want to be known regionally and nationally for the work that we do. And we want people to take notice that we're rolling up our sleeves, leveraging the humanities to do the work of repairing the bonds of democracy. And I think that is, it's innovative work. I think it's work that can put us on the map in new ways. And I think that if we do what we intend to do, that a lot of folks will be looking at this city in a new way. Now, in terms of reaching out to other folks in the community, actually, Kristen, can I kick that back to you? Because that's really right along the lines of what the SenseMaker is seeking to do.
Yeah, do you mean every 3 years, Mark?
Well, just in terms of how we intend to reach out to folks who are not otherwise part of these conversations.
Yeah, I think that some of that's to be figured out. Our initial dive into sense making is to look at where there are already networks formed and where there are community leaders who are willing to jump in and get started with the pilot. So the hard work then becomes us figuring out how do we find the nodes, the influencers in different communities who can bring people to the table to tell those stories. And that's not always obvious. It's not always obvious in that it's not always a political leader. It's often a church leader, someone in the community you're not thinking of. And so there's that almost ethnographic work of getting into the broader community and figuring out who those partners are. But that's where I love to talk to a lot of people. So I'm excited about that part of the work.
Yeah, and actually, Kristen, can I kick something back to you again? Because there's a phrase that you've been using in our conversations internally called epistemic justice. And I'm wondering if you can share what that means and how that's a driving influence for what we want to do.
Yeah, briefly, it's this concept that you have the knowledge of domain experts, which it tends to be the knowledge domain that is driving decision making, and you often don't include, or we often don't include, the knowledge of the community, which is another expertise that is untapped, and that is the goal here. How do we bring the knowledge of the community in conversation with the knowledge of subject matter experts, of domain experts? That's what we hope will happen at the center. And Greg Snyder has a question. Are there precedents in other cities and places that you found inspiring?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of modeling work as these ideas began to unfold over the course of the last year. And one of our early inspirations was an organization out of Dallas, Texas, called the Dallas Institute for the Humanities and Culture. And they've been around for 40 years, and they've really been at the forefront of bringing the humanities into community conversation. And their mission is specifically towards the development of the Dallas region. And so they've made that connection between the humanities and the practical life of the city. And so they were an inspiration. Our model has deviated in terms of the community outreach work that we're doing with SenseMaker, and then the accelerator piece that we're adding to turn ideas into action and to support that work. The Dallas Institute really stays in that middle lane of doing the forum-based work, the conversations, the convening, the presentation work. We wanted to broaden it so that way it's not simply conversation and elucidation of ideas that are inspirational. We really wanted to connect community knowledge with the forum, with supporting ideas that are inspired, so that way we have this cycle of insight to action. And so I think to that degree, we are very different from the Dallas Institute, but they did provide a core inspiration for us.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Greg, for that question. I think we're at the end, and I wanted to turn it over to Deborah to close us out.
I want to thank everyone who made this evening possible, our working team, our production team, and to Mark, who continues to bring innovative ideas to Charlotte. But most of all, thank you for giving us your time, your enthusiasm, and your energy tonight. Together, let us welcome the new year. And in the spirit of our musical opening, we've only just begun. Thank you and good night.